Hello, my name is Crystal Gibbons. I'm Global Missions Communications Coordinator, and we have partnered with the Holiness Today podcast to share stories from the mission field about what God is doing around the world. And today I'm joined by Pastor Cezi Glendenning. She is the Field Strategy Coordinator for the Central Europe field, an area that she knows very intimately, which we'll find out more in our conversation today. But her journey into faith, ministry, and leadership is full of unexpected turns, deep questions, and powerful reminders of God's relentless pursuit. So, Cezi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and sharing with you a little bit about my journey in Central Europe.
Me too. I'm excited. I know a little of your story, but I'm excited that we get to share it with the world and kind of dive into some of the details of how you got to where you are today. So first of all, obviously, Glendenning, you were born and raised in Albania. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So Glendenning is probably not your maiden name.
No, my maiden name is Tsufai, and but I'm married to Martin, and I took his surname. I actually wanted to keep both of them, but uh, it's just when I was thinking filling forms, there was not enough squares for my name, Cesarina Tsufai Glendenning. I was like, okay, let's just keep it easy.
And how did you meet Mark?
I met Martin in Germany. So I went to the European Nazarene College to prepare for ministry, and Martin came we came a week apart from each other. He came to be the regional finance coordinator, and I came to study. This was my second degree, and it's funny because when the first moment we met actually throwing trash, and so one when I was applying for a visa to go to Germany, they asked me, where did you meet your husband? And I said, in Busingen. And it was like, no, but where? I was like, in Busingen, it's a small town. And it was like, no, but where? I said, at the trash can. And so but yeah, we met in Busingen, and he was at the regional office, and the regional office and the college shared a lot of their, social life. And so that's how we got to know each other a little bit more. And yeah, we were friends for 3 years. It's only by graduations that we actually realized that, we really liked each other. And yeah.
Yeah, that's often how a good love story begins, is as friends. And yeah, and you share that vision of mission and ministry. And how long have you been married at this point?
I've been married 13 years, and I was applying to be a missionary on my own. So I had submitted my application to be a missionary. So our journeys really kind of met very nicely and smoothly. So yeah, it was a nice, it
Yeah,
was,
and you have two beautiful boys. What are
yeah.
their names? How old are they?
Two boys, Ruben, who is 10 years old, and he's our artist in our family. Martin and I are really not artists, so we sometimes struggle to be parents of an artist. He loves piano and painting and drawing, and he's a deep philosopher. And then we have Lucas, who is more into sports and very charming, and he's a social butterfly, very talented in different ways. So we like our boys. We'll keep them.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. It is always amazing to me, having two kids of my own, how different they can be when they come from the same DNA, they're raised in the same home, but somehow completely different.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. I was talking with a friend yesterday because Lucas has this incredible emotional intelligence. Like he can enter the room and measure the emotional temperature of the room. And Ruben is the opposite. He's very much focal. Like he's sensitive in a different way, but he's much more focused on himself too, and what he wants and what he likes. And so I was like, it's incredible how these two children and they look alike. They look so much alike. They look like twins, and still they're such a different personalities. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really special. Well, so I mentioned at the beginning that you were born in Albania. Um, Tell me a little bit about what your childhood in Albania looked like, or what you experienced in that kind of a culture.
Yeah, so I grew up in the northern Albania. I'm both of my parents were political activists, so I grew up into this family that was very socially involved. My dad also had spent 12 years in prison because of being against communism, and then my mom waited for him for those 12 years, and together they were moved by the government in this area of Albania where they to do hard works, and so we were surrounded more or less with people that had the same background like us. And so I grew up in that environment, but I really didn't know the difference with other children until I started going to school and I saw that there was we're being treated differently, being considered like enemies of the country, of the children of the enemies of the country. So that was the first period. But I am very thankful for my parents because both of them were able to really nurture this freedom of mind from such an early age. I remember going to school and we would come home and my dad would ask, "What did you learn today?" and try to deconstruct it with us if it was something that really was not in line with this having this freedom of mind. And I remember one time when I was in school, um, this political leader had come to visit our school, and my sister and I both had these our pictures on the wall because that's where they will put the best students of the school on the wall. And he took the picture of my sister and just teared it apart and said right in front of us and said, "What is the daughter of the enemy of the country doing on the wall?" And that's for me was like it just broke my spirit. And I decided not to study anymore. I was like, oh, there's no what's the point? And I remember this conversation with my dad, and my dad, took me aside and said, "Okay, what's going on?" And I said, "Dad, there's no point. Like we are different." And my dad said, "Cezi, like this system will take everything out of you. Like they can take everything you own, but there's one thing they cannot take, and that freedom in your mind. And if you lose that, it's because you are giving it away." And then he said, like, there will be better days. There will be days where you will get to choose what you want to choose. And that to me was like a turning point that kind of shaped a little bit the future, this idea that the freedom is in my mind and I own my freedom, and therefore I have to fight for it and not allow anybody to take it.
We'll be right back with the rest of this episode. But did you know you can receive credit for listening to Holiness Today podcasts? Holiness Today podcasts qualify for lifelong learning with the Church of the Nazarene. To register for lifelong learning, simply go to learning.nazarene.org. The Lifelong Learning Registry provides Nazarene ministers the opportunity to record and report their efforts to develop and maintain a pattern of lifelong learning. Every Nazarene minister is encouraged to engage in a variety of lifelong learning activities. The code for Holiness Today podcast will be listed in the show description. This code can be utilized for this episode and any previous episode you wish to listen to. Thank you for being a listener and sharing in the ministry of the Church of the Nazarene. Now back to the rest of your episode.
And then in the 90s, when communism fell, and my parents were part of all that process, and they were involved in overthrowing the Communist Party, then we did have finally that freedom of choice. And in the area where I was living, it was mostly Muslim. And so I embraced Islam because very young age, I had this curiosity about God. I used to look at the mountains because we had a little farm. And so I used to look at the mountain and I was like, is God as big as these mountains? And just like as a kid, when you're in the field with the cows and, you have plenty of free time to think about anything. And so I was looking at the mountain, and so I had this deep curiosity. I even would write letters to God and put them in the balcony, just thinking like, oh, he's going to take it. So when communism fell in my area, being mostly Muslim, and the properties were being returned to the people that they owned before communism. So the Muslim leaders came and claimed their properties, and so there was a mosque close by my town, and so just embraced Islam. And I just wanted to know more about God. My parents, both of them, one Muslim, my dad, and my mom is Greek Orthodox. And so I grew up with both influences in the family, and but mostly with my dad's side because the environment also was that, and my grandma was being Muslim and living close to us. She had quite a bit of influence, and so that was the beginning of really the journey with God and learning about God. And I loved learning about God. Like that was my passion. I would walk like an hour to go to the next town where they were teaching about Islam, and started studying the Quran, started to learn Arabic, to how to read the Quran. And I just loved, what I was learning about God. So, and then my family moved. My dad had a car accident in during that time, and he passed away. He was killed in a car accident. And so that kind of put me into a crisis also with my faith. And I just realized, why, that just these whys that at that age, and being a teenager at that point, they become a little bit more loaded with much more emotions. And the Muslim leaders that were in my area, say, no, this is God will, God has written this for him. And I was like, I don't know that I want to follow a God who has written all these things, including the bad things. And then what's our responsibility if he has written all our future? And so I don't think you can't say he's a good God and then he writes these terrible things for people. And so I gave up. I decided, that it was time for me. I didn't want to be following a God who did that. And at that time in Albania in the 90s, we didn't know what to do with the freedom, a country that has been in communism for 50 years and controlled to the minimum of your life. Like there wasn't a store you could go and buy stuff. The government would decide how much milk, how much bread, how much sugar, how much, all of it. And so based on the numbers of your family, and they would use to punish you based on those, if you don't behave, then you get less items. So being 50 years a country like that, although you can create freedom in terms of systems, but like there is that mentality still, there was that prison already in the minds of people. And so there was a lot of people who just didn't know what to do with their freedom, and a lot of bad things were entering into the country, and from drugs and human trafficking and all of this. And so to think of a God who somehow was involved in all of this just didn't go in line for me with with what I thought God should be. And so, yeah, and after I left Islam, my family moved to another city. I met two young girls, Vasi and Hella, and they're my best friends today too. And we've been bridesmaids on each other's weddings, and we continue to share life together with our husbands and children too. And but they were the first one who introduced me to Christ. Not like I knew about Jesus through Islam, and I knew what was wrong with Christians because you kind of get trained for it. But I could argue with them. But what stuck out for me was that how much love they had for me, and they had just become Christian themselves like a year before. So they were not really looking for an argument with me. It was me looking an argument with them. And so, but they were very kind in that they invited me to church, and I started my journey going to church. And I just enjoyed the church life. And I went home and I said, my mom, I would like to join the church. And my mom said, no, like you're a Muslim. And our parents had told us to choose the religion we wanted unless, but we couldn't switch. We couldn't be one day Christian and one day Muslim. So we had to commit to what we chose. And my mom says, you had committed to Islam. If your dad was alive today, he would be disappointed at this. And also the Protestant, while my mom was very familiar with the Catholic and Orthodox traditions because they have been for centuries in Albania, the Protestant faith or the evangelical community was completely new at this point to our parents, and there was a lot of influences in groups, and which as a parent now, I was like, I know why my mom was scared. Like I would be scared for my kid too. And but I was able, but eventually she kind of, allowed me to at least go sometimes. Or there was the church where I was going. They taught English, so I told my mom we can afford like extra classes of English, so I can go and maybe learn there for free. But the moment really that changed me on my faith journey was one day I was home, and there was a pastor that had come to teach, a missionary that had come to teach English in our school, and we became very good friends with my other two friends, and he said, I would like to start a church, and so could you girls help me? And I was like, I'm not a Christian at that point, so I don't know that I want to be involved in this. And he said, okay, can you send some brochures around? And I said, yeah, like I could do that. I can give brochures. So I took these brochures, and in one side was an invitation to the first service, and in another side was just this little story of Jesus in comics type of form. But I didn't read it. Like I just gave hundreds of invitation to all our neighbors and school and everybody. And one night I was at home, and finally my mom was outside. Albania was going through a difficult time at this moment. We were at the verge of a, total anarchy in the country. The government was about to fail practically, to go bankrupt, which it did later. And so my mom was outside with the neighbors, and she had put some candles around the house. And I just had this moment as I was sitting in the living room where it completely hit me, like what had happened to our family. Now, when my dad passed away, I did not cry. I really didn't go to his funeral. Um, I just kept doing the chores that he would do in the farm while my family was doing all the preparation for the funeral. And Albania has this long process of grieving, which I appreciated, but it was just my mom and my family were involved in that. And um, so I went completely numb. I think I tell people I have a delay response to tragedy. And so that moment, it just hit me. Like it hit me that my dad had passed away, that we have sold the farm, we had come to the city, that I was in a new school. I had new friends. I was in this new place only with my sisters and my mom. And I just had this panic attack and this anxiety, and it was a new emotions because I'd never felt that before. And
Right.
so, and I just started sobbing, and I couldn't breathe. And finally, I calmed down a little bit, and I took this brochure I've given to everyone. And at the end of it, it said, if you want God to be your father, just ask him to be part of your life. Now, I'd heard through my friends all of these things. So I just remember going on my knees and saying, okay, God, let's start over, and let's see how this is different. And so, and that was the moment. I accepted Christ several times after, because I was a very mean teenager at this point, and so I thought maybe I had to convince God.
Right.
but yeah, but that was the moment for me. And then just got involved in the church, and I helped to plant that church, and got involved into ministry right away. And so I tell people, don't put limitations to God, because here I was planting a church before I was even a Christian. And
Right. It's a crazy journey. Yeah.
yeah, so that was, a little bit my childhood
Yeah.
childhood in Albania. Yeah. Yes.
Wow. I mean, there's so many things knowing you a little bit now and seeing where God has you. There's so many things in that story that I can see him shaping you and preparing you. And that's that kind of prevenient grace where he knows the end of your story, right? And so he's preparing you and molding you before you even realize. I mean, looking back, can you see some of that in your journey at this point in your
Yeah.
life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And even starting before I became Christian, right? This even the desire to pursue him or to get to know more of him, that's all his gift. And one of the questions that the my Muslim leaders asked me when I became Christian was, why did you change religion? And I say, I didn't. I didn't change religion. I changed status, I said, because I loved God with all my heart as a Muslim. I really wanted to know, and I don't feel like I changed gods. Um, and I know this is not the experience of all Muslim people, and so I want to make that a difference. But for me, I said it's more like it's one thing to know the president of a country, and it's another thing to be the daughter of the president of a country. So to me, I felt like I moved from this citizen knowing about God to being his daughter now. And I sit at his table and I have a different access to him. And there's a lot of other stuff that I don't have to do, because I'm the daughter. So I don't see it as a turning 180 degrees. I see it more as moving towards deeper connection with God. And that for me was important because I didn't see my background as a Muslim as a bad experience, or and I know this is not. I work with refugees who come from the Middle East, and especially with women, where aspects of Islam has completely, broken them. And but this hasn't been my experience in
Yeah.
that. So um yeah, so those starting with that, and that's my parents' influence, my friends' influence, my pastor at that time influence. Just like there is just all these people around my path that all contribute to shape me in a different way. And I hope the same, because it's always both sides. But and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. So I just feel so pursued by God, like when I look at my journey, and I think that's the main contribution of transformation and change. Yeah.
Wow. That's just an incredible way to view that change of status. That I love how you said that you've always known God, you've always loved God, but you now recognize that he has adopted you into his family and that you are his daughter. That's really beautiful, Cezi. Now I know that after all those things you just shared, somehow you end up in Italy.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your time in Italy. And I know that you were really involved in ministry and all these things, and that you've even called that, finding your tribe, so to speak, that you've kind of found your people. So what did that time of your life, that season of your life look like? What kind of ministry were you doing? And what made you feel at home there in that place?
Yeah, so when I finished in high school, at that point I was praying to God to what did he want me to do, because I felt like I could go. I was good at school with schoolwork, and I just wanted to do something that God could use it in the future, and in any profession. And I didn't want to go necessarily theology, because right before I finished high school, the war between Kosovo and Serbia was happening. So I was volunteering as a translator at the borders, and then after that, we went to Kosovo to help some of the families to rebuild their lives. So I spent the summer there, and so I knew that God didn't just need theologians at that point; that he needed engineers, he needed, he needed people with skills. And I was like, I could be that person with skills. And so I came back and I signed up like to be either a lawyer. I wanted to become a judge because also the juridical system in Albania was so corrupt. And I was like, okay, I want to go into this route, or engineering was another one. So I can go around the world in post-war zone areas and help for the rebuilding. So these were my two places where I landed. And my mom at this point also had a NGO for women with like single moms or single parents, and that she's, she became part of in our city. And she was collaborating with some Italian organizations. Um, and so she asked me, if I could translate because I spoke fluent Italian. So I became friends with some of these leaders that were coming to Albania and translating for them. And as I was finishing high school, one of them told my mom, why don't you have Cezi maybe sign up to come to Italy and study instead of Albania? And I was like, no, I want to be here with my friends. You know how it goes. I want to be, I want to apply here. And my mom said, no, like the Italian embassy has open possibilities for application. Just apply. And I said, I won't get it. Like will be like thousands of applications. Why would they choose me? And so I signed up for engineering and law. And my mom signed me up. Let's put it this way. She filled the form. I said, just to get it off my back. I was like, let her do it. And so I and so she applied, and then I was called to be interviewed with representatives of the embassy. It's like an oral exam, like it was an oral conversation in Italian too, because they also want to see how your Italian is. And they interviewed me for the engineering one. And I took, and it was only one position offered for it. And so I was able, to take that. And they gave me a visa. I was like, okay, but I still have to go to Italy and do another exam there. And there's at least 200 people applying, and there's only 20 openings at the University of Florence on engineering. And these are people from all over the world who have much more resources, that prepared much more. And I'm going to do that exam. Probably I won't get it. I can come back. And I got a trip to Italy too. And so like I didn't prepare at all. The only thing I did, I took a dictionary at the beach because we lived at the coast, and I would just go through the dictionary and look at the words of math and chemistry and physics, because that's the three exams I had to give, written and oral. And so I was like, yeah, I just learned at least some terminology. And so I go and give this exam. I go to Italy, I give the exam, and ended up to get the highest score of the 200 people. And I was like, bummer. Like I was supposed to fail this, like I wanted to, and now I have no excuse, to go back to Albania. And I was so mad at myself, and I was like, but, I was like, God, this is a journey with you. And so, yeah, I to Italy, went to another church, to a free Pentecostal church, and which was very, very conservative, like women in one side, men in one side, which, and I said, just because they do that doesn't mean that they are a bad church, but it was very close. Like I couldn't even sign up to clean the church. I don't know. I guess I wasn't holy enough for it. And so, and I realized I wasn't the person coming from Albania, where I practically live at the church in serving, to being the Sunday person who sit at the pew was just not my thing. And so I needed to find a community, not just to go on Sunday, but to be part, to serve in it. And so I didn't know what to do. I tried this church for 7 months. It didn't work. And a friend of mine that was coming from the same city, we met at the bus. And she was part of the Wesleyan church in my city. And her husband has directed her to the Church of the Nazarene, because there wasn't a Wesleyan church in Florence. And so she said, why don't you come to my church? And I was like, what church do you go? She's like, a Church of the Nazarene. I was like, what's that? Is that a sect or what? Because I hadn't heard before about the Church of the Nazarene. And so I remember just going that Sunday with her the next Sunday with her, and I just fell in love with this church. Like by the end of the service, I had 3 invitations for dinners in people's houses, which has not ever happened on the other community. And they were just so loving and so excited. I didn't even know what the Nazarenes believed, but I remember just coming out and telling my friend, okay, these are my people now. I'll figure out on the way what they believe, but I love this community. And after a month, Pastor Daniel Fink, who is the DS of Italy now, and the pastor, still pastoring the church, after a month, we were sitting together, and I said, "Hey, Daniel, there's so many young adults here. Why don't you start a youth group or like a young adult group?" And he's like, "Why don't you start one?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I just started getting involved. Then I went through membership class, and it was a huge revelation of, I was like, this is the theology that, like I have been longing for, put it in this way. And so it's just, and I then that became my people. And so, and still my people, still my membership in that church, and still quite involved in the Italian district, and of course now involved quite a bit in the Church of the Nazarene in general. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've had the privilege of being in Reverend Fink's church in Florence, and it is a beautiful group of people. I can see why you fell in love not only with the Church of the Nazarene, of course, with the theology and all of that, but with the people and the community that they've built there. It's an incredible group of people. So at what point, so obviously you're actively involved, you're doing young adult ministry, you're, helping at the church. But at what point do you feel like I'm being called to something more? It's something shifted in you from being a layperson to, I think I might be called into like active pastoring or elder status in the church. What made that shift for you, or when was that shift?
That came quite a bit later, I think, because I thought, I just wanted to finish engineering. But after a few years that I was in Florence, I got involved. I was working at a foster home, and I was doing protected meetings between parents and children for the courts. I was involved in our local ministries, and it's like engineering had become a hobby at this point. And so I just I realized that maybe engineering wasn't going to be my path, but I did want to finish it because I have this obsession to finish things that I start. And so, um, I worked 1 year as an engineer as part of my internship, and I realized this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So it's just, I enjoy the numbers, I enjoy science, um, but I was like, if I look back at my life, I've always been with people, and it seems I need to be with people. And especially in the engineering environment, it's a very male dominant market. At least it was at that time, less now. And it's like I have to be extra mean to people, to get the work done because I'm a woman. And so, and I'm a foreigner woman too, in a foreign country. And so my Albanians didn't have a great reputation at that point in Italy either. And so I kind of struggled with all of that. This is also the time I started joining like NYCs around the region. Started with the one in Bulgaria, where I met several of the leaders that are like, that's where I met Diego Lopez. That's where I met Diedra. That's where I met Jana and Tim Evans, like that was the group of people like at that conference. And so, and then I was asked to go and represent Italy because I was NYI leader for the Italian district at Third Wave in South Africa. And so that was for me the turning point really of my journey, because when I went to South Africa, I remember I really wanted to go to Soweto. Growing up with activist parents, I've always somehow been involved in politics. And I was, I'd read a lot about Nelson Mandela and the apartheid and, all that. So I was quite informed, and I was like, man, if they do this service, they would dedicate a day where they went to serve in the community. I was like, I really hope they sign me up to Soweto. I just want to go to Soweto. And I ended up in Soweto
Wow.
with my group, and just and we were working with a community that was underserved, where HIV was a huge problem among children and women and everybody. And so and of course a lot of poverty. And I remember coming back to the hotel and just sobbing, but not because of poverty and issues, because I grew up in a country that is poor. We struggled as a family. We ate today. We didn't know what would come tomorrow. So it wasn't the poverty that really stuck out to me. What it did to me is that the world had become so big with so many problems, and I didn't see that my life could make a difference in it. Even if I gave everything, it just felt this overwhelming broken world where no one of us could make a difference. And so again, like, that freedom of mine was becoming smaller and smaller. And I didn't want to go to the service, but a friend of mine is like, "Hey, you've come here to represent your district, so you got to go for the sake of it, like, this is not about you." And I was like, "Okay, like, always surround yourself with friends who speak truth into your life, because they're amazing." And so I
Yes.
went to service, and it was Dr. Warwick was preaching that night. And he preached on the little boy who gave his bread and fish to Jesus. And he said, "It's your bread and fish will not make a huge difference. It might feed one person for one day, but it's giving it to Jesus that makes it enough and sufficient to make a difference to the masses." And so it's like, whatever you have tonight, whatever your crumbs are, or fish, or loaves of what you have, why don't you bring those to Jesus? And I just felt that sermon last night was just for me. Like, just he did that sermon, and I remember going to the altar, and that was the first time in my life where I just felt I laid down everything I had to God. And I was okay if he took it all. Before, I've always been a bit, I wanted to keep a part of me, not to give it away. But that night, and so then I got up and I was pumped up, like, it was just gonna go and change the world. And it's like, I thought I'm gonna be the next Mother Teresa of the world. And just that, she's Albanian too, and therefore I
Yes.
do
Yes.
it's no,
I love that. Yeah.
but like,
Disclaimer.
I was like, I'm God, like, here I am now, let's go and do this. And so went back to Italy, and nothing was happening. So I continue having my miserable life. And but I think what was happening, and this is another of those turning formative points, um, to this point, everything I've done, I've succeeded. I've experienced little failure in my life. And what it does to you, though, when that happens, is that it creates this mentality of being invincible and being a person who can do anything, and it feeds this ego that becomes bigger and bigger. And so I could look at myself as, I look at all the things I've done, like, look at how good I am, and look at how smart I am. And I don't think, if God wanted to make any difference through my life, he couldn't absolutely do it through that self view, which I wasn't even aware, at that point. I think I built this castle, my imaginary castle on my own, and, I was the queen of it. And so, and like, nothing was happening till a certain point. There was a change of immigration law in Italy, and so I couldn't renew my papers. That meant I lost my job. That meant I lost my apartment. That meant that I couldn't finish. I'd finished engineering, but I had to do the state exam to be habilitated to do engineering. I couldn't do any of it, and so So it's like I was in a relationship that broke up too. Like there was this entire thing that was just falling apart. And I started having anxiety. I started having panic attacks, and those, like was like, no, I help people who have those. I'm not. And so I would get mad at myself, like, why like this is no, Cezi, just get it together, like and the more it happened and the more I would get like I was just an angry human being at that point. And I just started praying to God and I said, okay, you got to give this fish and bread to me back because clearly you don't know what to do with it. Like,
Oh, right.
that's like, was not the deal. This is not. And so, and I just felt this complete silence from God. And then I was like, at certain point, the anxiety became so bad, and I would sob out of nowhere. Like there were these waves of grief that would come that I just didn't know what. I just like would be sobbing on the bus or walking on the street like a crazy person. And so just like and then I prayed one night and I said, okay, God, like I'd heard preachers who say you got to demand the promises of God. And I was like, I'm gonna demand, peace, God. You promised peace. So all I want to be able to breathe. I want peace. And nothing was happening until one night it hit me. And this is, I think, in the Nazarene church, maybe we call it entire sanctification moment, like this moment with God where
Yeah.
he just everything changes in you. And that was for me it. I remember just being in the room in my bedroom, and it just hit me, and I said, God, I feel like I have been this very um spoiled kid you have, and everything good that I thought I had built, like that
Mm,
was a gift of yours to me. Like that goodness, it's your gift to me,
right.
not me producing it from anything. And so, and now all those good things you've given, and now I'm like that kids that you keep giving gifts and then they start demanding it from you. And so, and I said, God, I am deeply sorry for being that kid at this moment. And you owe me nothing. Like, and
Mm,
if I have to spend the rest of my life in this condition, I will serve you. I choose you. I don't have another place to go. And so, and just had this deep gratitude with deep grief just for having had the chance to have so much of goodness of God in my life. And so, and I was okay that maybe from now on this is who I was going to be, and I was going to try to do my best to serve God in that condition.
yeah.
And then I fell in this deep sleep. And, I'm not a mystical person, but this was for me a mystical moment
Okay.
because when I fell asleep, I had this dream where I went to God's presence and I was completely naked and bleeding, and I had cuts all over my body, and I was leaving a trail of blood behind me. And I had these pieces of glass in my hand, and I just went to the feet of God. I didn't see, I was just looking at his feet, and I said, God, this is all I got now. Like, and those glasses, pieces of glass were my life. And if you can do anything with it, like I give it to you. And so, and I've just felt the hands of God taking those glasses. I thought he's gonna stick them together, but I'll always be a vase who had been broken, like, and but that's okay. And then he just handed me this beautiful new vase in my hand, and he said, I've melted you into something new. Now go and serve me. And just like, and I woke up just overwhelmed with the presence of God. Like I thought, like, if I died at that moment, it was okay. Like if there were coordinates in the universe where I needed to be, that was it for me. That was my 0.00, like, and just had this incredible and so I stayed in that condition, and no more anxiety, no more. And I'm not saying like, this is the experience of all, and you're not if you're struggling with anxiety that, if it's your fault or something. But for me, this is where that's where it was for me, or that you're not praying right, like has nothing to do. That was just this moment of me resisting to God's presence and allowing it at that point for God to really kill my ego that I had created. Like it just is like, if you got to go into the world with that attitude, you're going to do so much damage. So if you really want to serve me, you have to be able to be okay to be broken apart, because that's what would happen when you are broken, when you're going to be next to broken people. And you have to be okay with the process of constantly breaking and melting into something new constantly.
Yeah.
And that to me was that big lesson in life. And so I got up, and I started calling. I'm not a person who sits on the couch for things to happen. And but so I wrote a plan. But this time it was more like, before it would be more like God leading, and I would say, okay, let me take over, like, come follow me, Jesus. Like, I'll show you how we're going to do this.
Sure.
So but that ended me, brought me to that place where I was doing things for God but not with God. And now I was like, I want to be able to do things with God and not just for God. And
Yeah.
so I wrote down this plan, and I still have the journal. I was reading it the other day, and just where I wrote this plan. And the first 4 points were that I wanted my church to see that I do have a call to ministry, and I wanted them to confirm. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing something that I'm not called into. And I did have a beautiful community and healthy community to confirm that. Second, I wanted to be able to I wanted to I didn't want my mom to have a heart attack when I told her I'm leaving engineering for theology. And at that point, I had zero money, and God needed to provide something, like a job or something, you know. And so I remember calling Daniel, Pastor Daniel, and say, Daniel, I want to meet with you. And and he said, come tomorrow. And right after our phone call, I received a phone call from one of our missionaries, Jessica Morris. And she said, Cezi, European Nazarene College is offering a full scholarship to go to Germany. Now, I know probably you're not interested, but I just felt compelled to ask you if you would be interested. I'm just sobbing, like, just overwhelmed. And right after, my mom calls and said, I'm talking to her, and she's like, Chezi, I think there's something wrong going on here. And I said, Mom, it's okay. My mom had been having health issue with her heart, and I didn't want to say anything that to worry her. So I haven't involved her at all in this process. But kind of, she said, okay, you have to talk to me because I sense there's something, wrong. And I just vomited it on her, the entire thing, like it's like, and my mom said, you know what, Chezi, all my life I've tried to deroute you from this, from
Mm,
this journey. Maybe this is time that you take this route. And don't worry about us. I was the main provider financially for my family. So going to theology was going to be a bit traumatic.
yeah.
But don't worry, like, if you feel God is calling you to this, he will provide. And just like sobbing, because that's not words of my mother, like. And then I went to meet Daniel the next day, and I was sharing with him, and she's, Chazzy, like, we have always known, like, this is your path. We got your back. It's just like it's constant sobbing. So I packed my life, everything, in 2 suitcases, 7 years, and went to Albania to apply for visas, got the visas within a month, which was a miracle, a story in itself, and uh, got to Busingen just on Sunday. And on Monday, I started classes. And I just remember going out in the lawn, and I just was breathing deeply for a second, and I just felt like I was where I was supposed to be, and that a new journey now was unfolding for me. I had no clue what I was going to do. Ordination at this point was not even something I was thinking about or pursuing. I was just, like, I just wanted to prepare myself to serve God in whatever forms. And then Busingen became a healing place for me. It became a place where I kind of got more in touch and understanding myself and being comfortable with who I am, with my edges, with my smooth parts, and so it was like a holy ground for me. And yeah, and then the rest unfolded from there.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, to hear how God really made the path clear to you, and it took obviously. I know I'm a little bit of a stubborn daughter of Christ. It sounds like maybe you have a little of that in you, and I think sometimes God has to make it really clear, say it many times, take things away. I mean, I sometimes I wish I wasn't like that, but I am. And so I just when you can see it in someone else and you can so clearly see God just guiding you to this place. And as Pastor Daniel said, we've known this, your mom said, I've been fighting this. So God clearly had this path for you. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. So you go to EUNC. We know you met Martin there. You started, your family out of that experience and your ministry. You guys went on to be missionaries that have served in many different countries around Europe, and then eventually, and sort of one of the main reasons that I'm interviewing you today is because after serving in many different capacities just a couple years ago, you were appointed as the Field Strategy Coordinator of Central Europe. And for those that are listening and maybe aren't familiar with the structure that kind of makes up the Church of the Nazarene, there's the global church that is made up of 6 regions around the world. And those regions have a number of fields, depending on that's made up of maybe one country if it's large, but usually it's multiple countries that make up a field. And there's a field strategy coordinator that is over that field that reports to, of course, the regional director and the church as a whole, and kind of helps to not only establish the strategy for the way that the districts do ministry and how you grow churches, how you plant new churches, you help with the missionaries that are on your field and all kinds of different things. But you were appointed in that role, and really you're the first woman to hold that role in Eurasia, which is a huge honor. I mean, obviously, now that we've talked for quite some time and I know you, it wasn't surprising. Of course you are. You were made for this. I mean, from the moment of growing up, with activist parents who are you were trained to care about people and what's right and what's wrong, justice, all of these things, these moments in your life, working at the border, when there's these people that are torn away from where they're meant to be, and they're on this journey. And then, of course, your time in Italy has all led to this moment. So what has your experience as a field strategy coordinator looked like so far? What have you found that you really rely on in your past experience that has helped you in this role? And how can we really be praying for the Central Europe field?
Oh, I think, yeah, it has been an incredible journey. Honestly, I resisted the idea of picking up this role when it was offered to me,
Big job.
and the main reason was, honestly, I'm a very much Balkan mama, and I was like, oh, this is going to require a lot of travel, and I just, I want to be around my kids, but when Martin and I were praying about it, we just felt we took a weekend to go to the coast, just the two of us, just to pray and listen to God. And and Martin said, Cezi, like, this is, for me, it's a no-brainer, but it feels like God needs to convince you. And I was like, well, it's it could bring a lot of stress on our family, and I don't want to the kids growing up. And it's like, if God has called you into this, you shouldn't worry about all of it, and we will just have to check in constantly, do more harder work, and be more intentional, which already we already do. So, and it's like, you have to take this. And so we prayed about it, and we felt so much peace about taking this role. And the reason was because I just felt that in this season, my predecessor did a great job in a lot of areas, but there was a new season for the field, and it felt that my gift and graces were what were needed for it. And so that's what convinced me, like, and yeah, and so I was like, okay, let's do this. It's not something I want to do all my life, but if God, if if I can see what is needed and what I have to offer, it seems they match together and will take the challenge on. And it has been incredible. It was a confirmation on that sense, because there's a lot of good things happening. So we see ourselves at this time in Central Europe, which includes at this moment 14 countries. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland. That's the Scandinavian district. And then we have Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, and Kosovo. And so also the fact that I grew up in this part of the world, most of my field, with the exception of the Scandinavian countries, are more post-communist, like with a strong history of Catholicism or Orthodoxy. So all very familiar for me, and how all these have worked together. And of course, having that Balkan culture too. But at the same time, I've lived outside the Balkans enough to see it also from outside. And so all of this, I felt like, okay, I'm happy to take on this role. And the people I work with, we have been colleagues for so many years. So they really solidify this idea for me that I have an amazing team to work with. And it's going to be, you know, it's going to be great because of them. And so if we're going to fail, we're going to fail together. And if we're going to succeed, we're going to succeed together. And it's going to be good because we're going to be together. And so, and it has been really amazing. So we have parts of our fields that needed a little bit of a pruning and cleaning up. And so there's this aspect of what's happening in our field, but there is also this new life that is bursting, and it's such a beautiful life and healthy. Thanks to the work of our missionaries, and I have an incredible missionary team too. Like it's that like hot, like really incredible, gifted people of God, um, just very committed to the work that they do. And so these are the two aspects, I think, that has been really bursting into our. And I hope, our priorities has been, of course, like we're a little bit behind with leadership development. So we're kind of missing almost a generation of new leaders, but we have some young people who are incredible, and so we want to invest into their lives. We do also want to become, we have been supported by the global church for so long now, 25 years. But we do want to become people now of generosity, not just people who receive, but people who give. And our churches already give. A lot of them give beyond of what is required of them, but we want to be even more. We want to mobilize people. And now with also this emphasis of Jim Ritchie and the global mission on the cause, like I'm so excited, because that's in my heart too, to mobilize people so they can move and serve in different places. And there's a lot of administrative cleanup that we need to do still in the different countries as the laws change, and that's another aspect. So a lot of prayers on that one, because a lot of our countries, while they're our churches are incredible, they do operate in some corrupt environments, and so we have to navigate that with wisdom and with integrity. And so it's not always easy in that. So a lot of prayers for that. And a prayer for a younger generation, to raise a new generation of young people who take ownership of being God's partner in healing our lands. Our lands, if you look back at the history, especially the Balkans, we've had peace in the last less than 30 years. This area of the world has always been a firecracker, and so and we are living this moment of peace, but those wounds are still in our people, like the damage that communism has done, the damage that a 500 year of being under Ottoman Empire has done. Like those are still things that we carry in our systems, and in some of the mentalities. So we really I just pray deeply that God raises a new generation with that freedom mindset, where we all take ownership to the communities God has called us and be agents of healing into that community, where Jesus makes a difference to people today. Not like this philosophical, do you want to go to hell or heaven? Like, not none of it, like, not that, but just today, how is Jesus making a difference in the life of a person? Because that's what Jesus did. He went to people and said, "Oh, you hungry? Here's food. Oh, so you're sick. Here's, like, oh, you're sad. Here's some freedom of mine." And so, and that's what I want our people to embrace, this ministry of holiness. And in our side of the world, to me, that's so important. Because we there's a lot of theologies there, and of course respectful and all of that, but there's something about the holiness tradition for me, that is this God who just journeys with you and transformed you. He doesn't give you the courage to resist to bad things, but he just like takes that desire to any, or like who gives you the courage then to step into situations where he needs justice and healing. And so yeah, that's my deepest prayer, is that our young people and older people, everyone experience this transformation, which is, of course, I see my journey is not easy. It can be painful at times, but it's so necessary to become the full of ourselves, the complete person that God has called us to be, and give that to other people. And just as a last thing, like this past week, I've been working with a lot of broken, I've worked always with refugees,
Yeah.
and there's so much brokenness that comes through that journey. And I just realized, and a lot of non-Christians too, that friendships. And I came home after a week of ministering and doing pastoral care with some relationships that I've been developing here. I just realized how peace is a luxury today. You know, it's a
Yeah.
luxury of few people, where you really wake up with full lungs of air. And I don't want that for people. This is not what God has called anyone, to live that life with half breaths. And that's why I think this message of holiness brings peace, not as a luxury, but as a norm. Like, peace is a norm for me. It's not something I have to worry about. And then operate into the world and into relationships from that place of healing and peace. Yeah. So that's my deepest desire and prayer request and hope for the field. So yeah.
Those are great things, and I really hope that the people listening will pray for Central Europe, for you, for the ministry, and for those things that you asked for. And um, I think it's really important what you said there at the end, that that idea of peace being a luxury, and that's what you want for people, and that's what God and Jesus wants for us, right? That's part of the Holy Spirit's gifting to us, is to bring that peace that's unspeakable. It doesn't make sense, to the world, and maybe even in our situation, it doesn't make sense. And I've often thought about, this podcast and the magazine Holiness Today, and I've thought, what does holiness look like today? How do we live it out? What does it look like to others? And so I really like that you brought that into it. So to wrap it up, I just have a couple more little questions, maybe more fun type questions. But this issue of Holiness Today magazine is really focusing on the women of the Bible.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, is there a woman in the Bible that you really kind of just love? Either you love her courage, you love her sense of faithfulness to God, or you really relate to her in some way. Who is someone in the Bible that you really look to or enjoy their story or their...
Oh man. Um, there are several ones for different reasons. I do, and this might be my background with activist parents, but Esther always has stood out to me, like, of speaking to powers and not shying off away from stepping into dangerous situation just for the sake of people. And so that like her personality really kind of resonates with me. Of course, like I'm not entering in any courts, but I do have the urge that when there is a elephant in the room, I will be the person. We're not going to go anywhere till we talk about it. Like
Yeah.
we are going to point it out and we are going to resolve it, or at least recognize it's in the room and then move on if we don't want you remove if we don't want to remove it. So I think that is me. That's for me quite, yeah, her character quite, like, I resonate with her. I resonated with Eve for some time, and
Yeah.
I think that was that part of my life where I was hiding in the same garden that I had been placed. And
Yeah.
so, and just I felt constantly this and I do sometimes, even now that questions come, where are you? Like that, to me, it's a question that resonates quite a bit. And I have to figure out if I'm hiding or if I'm in full light or somewhere under a shade of a tree, like. And so, and recognize that that's where I am, and then, move on towards the voice that is calling me. But
Yeah.
so I think those would be two women in the Bible that I've resonated quite a bit. And yeah,
Those
those
are great.
yeah, yeah,
Great
yeah,
choices. And I wondered if you would choose Esther because, as scripture says, she was made for such a time as this.
yeah.
In so many ways, that's kind of what you had just said, is that, your history and your leading up to the position you're in, and the ability that you have now to affect change in Central Europe with the help of a great team, as you said. But you were made for such a time as this season, this point in history, at this place. You were made for this, Cezi. And I mean, what a beautiful thing. When I think about the women in the Bible, and as people go through this issue and read the different stories and the things that have been written about the women of the Bible, they all left a legacy, an impact of some kind on the church as a whole. And I'm curious, and this might be a tough question. I know it would be for me, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What would you like your legacy to be, your impact on the church?
Mm.
Yeah, in the future.
I think for me, it's the word that, as you were talking, the word that was just popping out in my head is health. Like that, that the legacy is a culture of healthy communities, where people, not perfect communities, but healthy communities where a group of broken peoples come together to become a body that is a light, that is a place of belonging, a place of healing. And if I can of course, like, I'm just hands and feet here, but if I can contribute a little bit to it, that's what I would like the legacy. I would also like to be, just as a woman, to be an inspiration to other women, because being a women leader in the Balkans, which is a very much, male dominant culture
Right.
in all the religious groups, like the more Christian traditions or Protestant. There's few Protestant churches that recognize this egalitarian view of women, and but also, like, in Islam, the same. Like, they're not, while women can hold some types of leadership, it's from a more modern branches of Islam, like, or in the Catholic Church, or in the Greek Orthodox or Bulgarian Orthodox, like, women play an important role in the communities, but they don't hold positions of leadership. And I really hope that, for me, it wasn't easy to see this role. Now, I was blessed because of my parents, but, and I grew up in a house full of girls. So we're five girls in my house. So
My
there was
goodness.
no other model but girls.
Right.
And so, like, I really hope that it becomes it becomes an inspiration for other young girls, because it's hard to become what you don't see. And I hope I do just how other women around me have been. I've seen them stepping into leadership, and they have become an inspiration and a possibility or a part of my imagination. Um, that I hope that I can be that for some of the girls, and not just because in the Balkan the risk is, and I've gone there several times, that being a woman, especially minister woman, you tend to take characteristics of a man in order to survive. Like you have to, because we're forging our own. What does it mean to be a female leader? So there's really not like minister. I haven't had any leaders in our fields, that were women. I have few of them, but not enough impact in my life, or I wasn't living with them or close to them to really see what does this mean practically. So I hope that I am more intentional on women, um, considering women for certain positions in our fields, not because they're women, but because I'm not looking for a gender to fill a position. I'm looking for gift and graces to fill a position. And if I can
Yeah.
find that on a woman, then I will probably prioritize a woman's position for the same set gift and graces in order to balance that, so we can have more and more leaders in equal, not equal, but in a balanced group of leaders, where young girls and young boys also can
Yeah.
see, that we are on this together. And a church for me that tries to run its life only with one gender, it's like trying to run a race with a foot, and so that's why I think women need to be in table. While I don't want to sacrifice the quality of work just because of women, like that's not what I'm saying. The church needs to be more intentional. And while I'm excited to have been the first, uh, you know, I'm excited to be at this moment the only woman that holds the FSE position globally, the second in the history of the church. But that is also sad to me. With a church which is mostly represented by women, there should be more going on. And I know our leaders will be more intentional for that, and I'm excited, especially with Jim. He's quite excited for that. Hopefully, one day we don't even have to have this conversation. That's what I hope. Where you enter a room and it has nothing to do with you being a woman or a man, which I will say in our region, I've been now 2 years into this role. I've never felt like entering a room and the people are saying, "Oh, she's a woman." Like I've never in our church.
Yeah.
I have an incredible group of FSCs in our region. So we have an amazing relationship. And I want that for any woman in the future. They can enter a room and I don't think, "Oh, I'm here with a group of men." They just see me as Cezi. They love me. They appreciate me. We have built so much trust throughout the year, and that's what it should be. But till we get better at it as a church, I think we need to be more intentional in deciding that certain sets of gift and graces, if they are on a woman, they should be prioritized.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think if people haven't listened to the conversation that Jim and Mark Lowe had on a previous episode of this podcast, I think they should go back and listen, because they said some incredible things that are right in line with what you're saying. And we really are running at a handicap if we aren't including all the voices at the table. And it's important. And Jesus did that. I mean, he included women in a way that in that culture was very countercultural. And so, yeah, I think you're right that you are starting, you and others. I mean, obviously, there's other women that are in leadership roles. Dr. Carla Sundberg, obviously at the top, and she's an incredible example for all of those, down the line. But I'm glad that women and girls and young men, all of the people that are that are on your field and in local churches, get to see you and experience your leadership, because you really are an incredible example of how God has put you there, not because of your gender, but because of your gifts and graces and your experience that you bring to the table. And so I'm just really thankful for you. So one last question, and then I'll let you go, is I know you're an incredible cook and you love food like I do. And so I'm curious what your favorite food is and if there's something in Albania that you really miss in particular.
Oh, I miss my mom's cooking from Albania. Like she just has this ability to elevate any plate. She's
Yeah.
just incredible. And I am a really good cook
Yeah.
but nothing like I try to make the same dishes and it's just not the same like my mother. Now, my family enjoys this because they don't know better, but I know better and that's my mother. And so
Yeah.
I do miss my mom's cooking, especially when she does burek or she does this rice and lamb in the oven, which is incredible. And she does. There's nothing I think that that woman makes that is not delicious. So, but favorite foods beside my mom's cooking,
Mhm.
I just when I travel, I collect spices and I collect
Ah,
tools to make
yeah.
foods that I enjoy. So if I go to a country and I try the dish, it's like, I want to eat this dish again and I want to make it. And even when I go and look the recipe, I don't look like westernized version of the recipe. I will look for the Google Translate a recipe from a person from that country or look on YouTube and see how it took me like 6 months to get a good salsa, because I was looking at Mexican YouTube videos, how they make it and the different types and so but in our house, we eat Mexican food once a week because that's a big deal. At Taco Wednesday,
See.
now, it used to be on Tuesday, but we do Taco Wednesday,
Okay.
and of course, I love Italian food.
Mm.
So all types of pastas and risottos, and deeply enjoy that. And I enjoy Indian food. I think once in 2 weeks
Yeah.
we make a tikki marsala at our home, and and so we enjoy that. We do sometimes Thai food, and of course, like burgers. I like food. I don't know. I
Yeah.
can't
I'm with
food.
you.
And so I would say today, probably today we are cooking lasagna, so that's what we have been craving. Tomorrow might be another food. So
Yeah. I love the diversity.
yeah,
It's great. I love that idea too of collecting spices and tools that are unique to countries or cultures that you're not familiar with. I love that. Yeah, we'll have
yeah.
to exchange
Brought
some
from
recipes.
I brought from India this plate. I don't know what's the name is now, but it's like this very heavy. I think it's like 10 kilos thing. I don't know. It's just too big, very heavy. Like I used half my my allowance
Luggage.
of
Yeah.
to make chapati, and so
Oh,
as
wow.
I was in this village and this lady was using it. So I put it on my gas stove and it gets very hot. And it's this like very heavy type of dome
Okay.
made of heavy metal. And I just put my chapati there and I was like, that tastes so
Wow.
much better than just doing it in a simple pan. Um, but my husband makes fun of me, especially when we have to clean things from the house. It's like, what about starting from the kitchen? It's like, no, 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 the kitchen doesn't get touched.
Off limits. We're not talking about that. Yeah. Well, Chizzy, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your story with me and with us as we've listened. It's really powerful to see how God has just kept pursuing you, that He had a plan for you, and as you followed His guidance, you are put in a seat at the table that I'm so thankful that you get to occupy for this season and this time. So thank you for sharing all that with me and allowing me to ask you some hopefully not too challenging questions,
Um,
but I really appreciate your time today. Thanks
yeah,
so
thank you
much.
so much for taking time, and I appreciate you, Crystal. Thank you for doing this with me. So you're doing a good job.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Holiness Today podcast. If you enjoyed this production and wish to hear more, visit holinesstoday.org/podcast,
or find us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.